Tonight on Bridge City News, the death toll from the Tennessee tornadoes has now risen to more than 20. We'll have more on the devastating twisters that also hit Nashville. Ontario has reported 3 new cases of the coronavirus, which brings the total number in Canada to 29. And the province announced today that it will be funding an extra 18 beds at the Blood Tribe safe withdrawal site.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Robbins.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. The provincial government announced today that the safe withdrawal management site at the Blood Reserve will receive an extra $2.2 million in funding. The money will help create an extra 18 beds at the Bringing the Spirit Home site, which will bring the total to 24. The province also announced $13.6 million this year for the Blood Tribe Police to help combat drug crime on the reserve. Provincial funding this year will increase $480,000 so that 5 additional officers can be hired.
The amount of ground that they have to cover here, dealing with challenges in the communities, I think that this will help us keep people boots on the ground so that they can provide the services required to keep people safe. We have to innovate. We cannot simply do things as we have in the past. It's not working. We have to change the dial and change the channel as to how we provide services. That includes how we police. It includes how we provide treatment as well.
The Blood Tribe Police has been under-resourced for many years, and that's no secret. As a result, the men and women of the Blood Tribe Police Service have been doing more with less. And that's a testament to their commitment to this community.
This means that additional 3,755 spaces over the next 3 years will be created. It also connects clients to other services to help them continue on their path to treatment and recovery.
The new funding for the Blood Tribe Police Service is part of a $1.4 million increase in the province's contribution to the First Nations policing program. The Alberta government says changes are coming to provincial parks that include 20 full or partial closures. Operating seasons in some provincial campgrounds are also going to be shortened. There will no longer be groomed cross-country ski trails in Peter Lougheed Provincial Park or in the Kananaskis Village areas west of Calgary. The province says the changes will include fee increases in the base camp rate, service fees, and group camping fees. The UCP is hoping the changes will save them around $5 million annually. A warrant has been issued for a man who never showed up for his manslaughter trial yesterday. Stanley Big Sorrel Horse was scheduled to stand trial on Monday, but was not there, so a warrant has been issued and the trial has been adjourned. Crown Prosecutor Michael Fox says they have no idea where he is. Lethbridge lawyer Tracy Hambroff has urged her client to turn himself in. She says he may not have received a ride into Lethbridge from the Blood Reserve. The 38-year-old sorrel horse is accused of killing Rance Bearhat 2 years ago in the Blood Reserve on February 23rd. A Calgary cyclist pleaded guilty yesterday for failing to stop at a red light in connection with the death of a pedestrian in 2018. Paul McNeil was fined $1,000. Now, following his plea, the Crown withdrew a separate charge of careless driving. Under Alberta's Traffic Safety Act, bicycles are considered vehicles and must obey all rules of the road. McNeil struck a senior who was in a marked crosswalk and later died in hospital from his injuries. The Associate Superintendent of Business Affairs for the Lethbridge School Division says current government funding will not keep pace with the student growth in our city. Christine Lee says they have around $3 million less in their budget than they did in the 2018-2019 school year. Lee says this year they received $110 million and next year just over $111 million. Lee says at the same time they anticipate an extra 230 students in the 2021 school year.
Why that is a concern to our district is that in the 2019-2020 school year, we received a $5 million cut to our class size grant and then some transition funding, which left us with about a deficit of $3 million that we had to make up with one-time reserve funds. So when we move into this budget with an additional $300,000 in instruction, we have to account for that $3 million that we actually used in reserves, compounded with we have about 230 extra students that are not funded under this new funding framework.
Lee says board members will meet soon to discuss how they can best absorb the year-over-year cuts from the province. If you're not familiar with escape rooms, they're attractions in which you have to solve mysteries to get out. They've become very popular, especially for companies that want to develop team building amongst employees. There are several escape rooms right here in Lethbridge, and we wanted to know just how safe these escape rooms really are. BCN's Lawrence Alexander went to the Great Escape to find out for us.
Imagine you're about to enter this dimly lit room.
Or you're locked in this room and there's some sort of emergency like a fire. There's no time to solve clues and you need to get out fast. That's why the owner here at The Great Escape says there's safety precautions in place.
At The Great Escape, you have 45 minutes to navigate the Wild West room. Without our camera light, it's pretty dark, and all you have is your brain.
So the Wild West room, basically what you're trying to do is you are looking to steal Willie Jackson's gold. So you have 45 minutes to get in there, find the gold, and get out of there before he returns.
That's just one game. There is also the game plan and inheritance. The owner says they try to make the decor look realistic, but here's what's not so obvious.
So there is cameras in all the rooms. We can see everything that's happening in the room at all times, and we kind of monitor the games to see where they're at, how they're doing, just make sure that nothing's going wrong for them. And we can always communicate with them through our hint button. We have a hint button inside the room. Anytime they need some help or have a question, they just press that button and it lights up a little light here for us, and we go in there and we kind of help them out.
Escape rooms are very popular.
Yeah, so
while the riddles and clues are tough, The Great Escape says safety is easy. For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau called for input on a plan to have Canada become carbon neutral by the year 2050. Trudeau said a plan for climate was needed as part of efforts to find common ground on business and the environment.
To adapt to major disruptions like climate change and seize new opportunities in emerging markets like clean tech, what we need to do is build common ground instead. Of course, we need to protect the environment at the same time as we create good jobs. Of course, we can only create a better, stronger economy for everyone if we are fighting climate change at the same time. We know that. Canadians know that. We just haven't reached that point of consensus where we argue about the best way to do it. There are still pockets of this country and the political debate arguing about whether or not to protect the environment.
More than 400 CN rail workers who were temporarily laid off last month because of the blockades are being called back to work. The blockade sidelined more than 1,400 freight and passenger trains. CN says it will take several weeks to ramp up shipmets. Some analysts say the blockades in support of the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs in BC cost the railway millions of dollars. Prime Minister Trudeau says he understands that his government has its work cut out when it comes to reconciliation. He says the key is to simply move forward.
There have been difficult times over the past few weeks, but Canadians have remained focused on moving forward. We know that centuries of marginalization, of oppressive, broken government policies have created a situation that is untenable. That is why so many non-Indigenous Canadians have been asking over these past years for us to do more on reconciliation, to do more to create real opportunities around language learning, around cultural protections, around solving and resolving the very many challenges in Indigenous communities, from lands and title to services that they need.
Ontario has reported 3 new cases of the coronavirus. That brings the total number in the province to 18, 15 of which are still active. The new cases are a result of people who returned from trips to Iran and Egypt. Egypt alone has over 1,400 confirmed cases of the virus.
I think what you've seen in that time is that when we expanded out to our wider number of countries, someone asked me, what was I expecting an increase? I was predicting we'd see about 20 to 30. So to see these numbers is, for me, is oddly enough, is reassuring. It tells me that the system is working, people are coming forward, people are being seen, and people are being assessed in that way. And that's the crux of our whole way. That's how we do it.
With the 2 new cases of the virus in Ontario, that brings the total number of novel coronavirus cases in Canada to 29. So far, none here in Alberta. U.S. Vice President David Pence met with U.S. President Donald Trump and executives with pharmaceutical companies to talk about the progress toward finding a vaccine to the coronavirus as the death toll in the United States climbed to 6. There are currently 43 active cases, 29 of which are either in Washington State or California.
We also met today with some of the leaders of the top pharmaceutical companies in the country. The president spoke to them not just about vaccines, which many of the companies are already beginning to work on, but just as importantly, the development of therapeutics. And It is remarkable to think that there may well be a vaccine going to clinical trials within the next 6 weeks. The nature of trials, as the experts have explained to us, is that the vaccine might yet not be available till late this year or early next, but the therapeutics giving relief to people that contract the coronavirus could literally be available by this summer.
2 more people exposed to a new virus on a cruise ship have been released from quarantine in Nebraska. It was bittersweet for Jerry Goldman and Joanne Kirkland, whose husbands remain in quarantine.
For myself, this has been an amazing experience. The way that the staff treated us, you know, friends are saying, oh my gosh, how can you do it? It was seamless. This place is special, and you guys should be very, very proud.
It was scary, but being in this situation like this, knowing I can't get out, it's not like jail, and I've never been to jail, but I imagine that a lot more days of this, I couldn't take it, I don't think. But it's been wonderful. Everybody has been so kind and good to us.
Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, says a vaccine may be coming sooner rather than later, thanks to the efforts of scientists at a lab in Israel.
Interestingly enough, there is a lab in Israel that has been studying this virus even before it became the pandemic that it is becoming. And they said that they may have the first look at some sort of vaccine within weeks from now, but that vaccine will have to be tested and retested again.
The full interview with Lisa Daftari is coming up after business news. Now here's an interesting twist on the coronavirus. 38% of American beer drinkers surveyed recently said they would not buy Corona beer under any circumstances at the moment, suggesting that some people may be mistakenly linking Corona brand to the coronavirus. Officials in Tennessee now report at least 22 people died overnight as a result of tornadoes which ripped through the region. One twister caused severe damage across a 16-kilometer stretch in downtown Nashville, destroying 40 structures, including a historic church. One witness described what he saw.
We just got back from the hotel, or from downtown, got to our hotel, and the roof from the other building right next to us was blown off, hitting our roof or our wall and windows, and the roof of our hotel below us was ripped off, and it was hitting our stuff, and yeah, it was pretty scary.
Fortunately, no tornadoes, but we've had a lot of wind in our region. The gusty winds will be sticking around, and there's a chance of some rain as well. Full weather details are on deck. There is a reason why Lethbridge is called the Windy City. Lots of gusty winds over the past couple of days. Jeanette Roche is here now with a look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, not only wind, but we may see more cloud cover and some rain as well.
Yeah, wind, and more wind is what we've kind of been seeing all week, Hal. Including this evening, we're going to be seeing gusts up to 80 kilometers per hour. We did reach the warm spot in Alberta at one point today with a high of 11 degrees. We're going to see an overnight low of 2 degrees. And then tomorrow, we're going to see that 60% chance of flurries or rain tomorrow with a high of 5 degrees. So quite a change from what we've been seeing, which has been mostly sunny and windy conditions. More sunshine in the forecast, though, coming up for us on Thursday and Friday with a high of 12 degrees, and possibly we could even rise up into the teens for Friday with a high of 13 degrees. Then look what's going to happen. We're going to drop all the way down to -4 on Saturday with a chance of flurries. Same thing, we're going to have snow on Sunday with a high of -2, and then we're going to climb back up to 4 degrees on Monday with a mix of sun and clouds. So our weather patterns are kind of all over the place right now. The average highs and lows for this time of year, high 4 degrees and -9 is the average low. So we're definitely above that range, which is great. The high temperature on this day was back in 1986. It was 19 degrees and it was a chilly -33 back in 1978. The sun rose this morning at 7:09 a.m. and it set at 6:17 p.m., giving us lots more daylight than we had even last week. So it is wonderful news for us. Looking to the West Coast tomorrow, they are going to finally see the sunshine out in Vancouver and Victoria tomorrow with highs of 10 degrees in Victoria, 9 in Vancouver. A chance of flurries up in Edmonton tomorrow with a high of 1 degree. 4 degrees is expected in Calgary tomorrow, and they are going to see some flurries as well. Same thing across Saskatchewan tomorrow. Saskatoon's high 1 degree. They're going to be seeing some snow flurries there as well, and a mix of rain turning to snow tomorrow for Regina with a high of 4 degrees. Now looking further west, we're going to be seeing some snow happening in Ottawa and Montreal with highs of 2 and 3 degrees there. No snow in Toronto though, they're going to have a mix of sun and cloud though, with a high of 5 degrees. And then looking further east, we're going to see lots of rain out here in Atlantic Canada tomorrow. Actually, between 5 and 10 millimeters of rain is expected in all of these areas, and fog in the morning, so they can be aware of that. Fredericton's high 4, 8 in Charlottetown, 7 in Halifax, and St. John's is going to see a high of 5 degrees. They're also going to be seeing some fog and some rain. There you go. That is your forecast, Hal.
Finance ministers and central bankers from the G7 decided that a coordinated response to the economic threat caused by the new coronavirus update is best. The U.S. Federal Reserve cut its benchmark interest rate by 0.5 point. It is the first emergency rate cut since the 2008 recession. Officials did vow to use all appropriate tools to deal with the spreading virus. Fears of its economic impact sent the Dow plunging 14% last week. As the coronavirus rattles the global economy and disrupts supply chains, companies in nearly every industry are confronting the risks of depending on China and other countries for production.
As the coronavirus dangers continue, we are monitoring it very closely, but very hopeful that we're able to continue business and not have to add any more stoppages due to the virus scare. Zenni's manufacturing model is completely reliant on Chinese production, and so any slowdown or work stoppages there affect our ability to deliver on time to our consumers.
Investors began to realize that this was quite a serious development, and I think actually what precipitated this was not the COVID-19 in China, it was that there was a spread from Italy to potentially other parts of Europe. And so I think now the idea is now we're moving from an epidemic to a pandemic, which will include many more countries. So I think that was the great fear that led to the market falling dramatically.
Farming. It is not a career for everyone. There's a lot of hard work involved, and you need some serious startup capital if you're considering getting into the agriculture industry. Ken Coles, Executive Director with Farming Smarter, says if you're able to manage the risk, you can become quite successful in the farming business.
I personally believe that someone that's dedicated to learning and always challenging the accepted practices is eventually going to be ahead of the game. But agriculture is really, the people that win it are the ones that can manage risk. So I do believe that the strengths in being able to create a farm system that best manages risks is the ones that are going to be successful.
Catch the full interview with Ken Coles with Farming Smarter, discussing how technology is helping farmers today. That's coming up after business news. Farmers are getting a break on cash advance loans available through the Canadian Canola Growers Association. Officials say the $50 administration fee has been eliminated for the 2020 Spring Cash Advance Program. It is available for over 50 crop and livestock commodities, including honey. Farmers can apply for a cash advance of up to $100,000 interest-free with a maximum of $1 million. The application period is open, and farmers could see the first advances issued on April 1st. Target is reporting strong fourth quarter profits, though its sales fell short of expectations. It joins a string of other American retailers, including Walmart, with disappointing sales during the shortened holiday season in the United States. Target did deliver its 11th straight quarter of comparable sales growth. The discounter also issued its annual profit projections, with the bottom of the range a little lower than investors were anticipating. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 129 points today to 16,423. The Dow was down 786 points to 25,917. The S&P 500 was down almost 87 points to 3,003, and the Nasdaq was down 268 points on the day to 8684. A lot of fears again surrounding the coronavirus. Oil was up 35 cents on the day to $47.10 per barrel. Natural gas was up 5 cents to $1.81. Gold was down 27 cents to $16.40.64 an ounce, and silver was down 42 cents to $16.80 an ounce. Wheat is at $224 per metric ton. Barley's also at $224. Canola's at $4.61, and corn is at $259 per metric ton. Live cattle were down 5 cents on the day to $112.65. Feeder cattle were down 20 cents to $136.03. Lean hogs were up 75 cents to $64.83. And the Canadian dollar was up slightly on the day to 74.74 US. We have an update now on a story we've been following regarding a Medicine Hat nonprofit group which was being detained in Ethiopia. Canadian humanitarians said in a release today that bail has been posted for the organization's 10 Canadian volunteers, 3 Canadian staff, and 2 Ethiopian staff detained at an Ethiopian jail since February. The release says they're hoping the detainees will be released sometime tomorrow. At that point, they'll be free to move within the country, but it is uncertain when they'll be allowed to fly back to Canada. Authorities have suggested the group may have to remain in Ethiopia until the investigation is complete. The group was originally charged with practicing medicine without permission and using expired medication. What are some of the biggest challenges farmers in southern Alberta face today? Soil conditions, competition? How about the ban of Canadian canola to China? Ken Coles, the Executive Director of Farming Smarter, gives us his thoughts next. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News Community Calendar. On Friday, March 6th, World Day of Prayer will be taking place at 2 p.m. at Southminster United Church and at 7 p.m. at the Coaldale Mennonite Church. All are welcome to attend. World Day of Prayer is an international interchurch event that will be celebrated in over 1,100 Canadian communities and in over 170 countries. The vision of this gathering is to restore hope to those who have been touched by injustice. So come join fellow believers in Christ as we lift up prayers of faith for our world. Come for a night of down-home fun to the Friends Winter Barn Dance on Saturday, March 7th, beginning at 7 p.m. at the Galt Museum and Archives. Proceeds will go towards educational programs at the Galt. Tickets are $30 for adults, $20 for youth ages 11 to 17, and children 10 and under are free. Purchase yours by visiting galtmuseum.com. Celebrate Recovery is a Christ-centered recovery program for any hurt, hang-up, and habit. This group meets Friday nights at Park Meadows Baptist Church. The evening begins at 7 p.m. with small group sessions at 8 p.m., followed by coffee and dessert at 9. For more information, visit celebraterecovery.ca. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
Agriculture is still a very big part of the Canadian economy, although the sector is facing challenges in a global market. Farming and ranching are also becoming more and more expensive and high-tech these days. Joining me now to talk about it is Ken Coles. He's the Executive Director of Farming Smarter. Welcome back to Bridge City News, Ken.
Well, thanks for having me, Hal.
Why don't you explain to our viewers, first of all, what is Farming Smarter all about?
You betcha. Farming Smarter is a group that's focused on farmers in southern Alberta. We're a nonprofit organization with a charitable status. And basically, we're trying to change the way people farm. We're doing that through conducting research. We do small plot research, field scale research out on the farm, and we try to adapt innovative ideas. And basically, any way we can do a better job of farming, we want to be able to enable that through science. And not only are we going to share the work that we're doing, but we're going to try to build a stage for all of the other scientists and agriculturalists out there that are working on better practices so that we can get that information out to farmers so that it's being used and it's practical and applied and being impactful.
What are some of the new innovative ideas that are really helping today's farmers here in southern Alberta?
Well, there's so much going on in just about every aspect of agriculture. Just keeping up to date with the new things is a challenge. So there's new innovations in marketing. There's new innovations in what types of crop to grow and how to grow them, how to collect data, how to manage information. Lots of different things going on that will both complicate and help do a better job with their farming businesses.
Are farmers maybe considering different crops as opposed to traditional wheat, barley, maybe even canola because of the China ban, the ban on Canadian canola in China? Are they maybe considering like cannabis or hemp or something
actually
unique?
All farmers I think across the province are always looking for new cropping options. So that's actually one of our main programs within Farming Smarter. We call it the Novel Crops Program. So we'll test out new crops like cannabis or hemp, things like quinoa. We've played around with things like camelina, all types of different crops that are grown in other parts of the world. We want to see how do they work here in southern Alberta. So there's a couple of things. You got to figure out how well does it grow under these conditions, and the other thing is there actually a market for it? So that's one of the challenging things with bringing in new crops is are we going to be competitive with other parts of the world, or is it something that we can have a niche and actually make some money at? So that's definitely a good question. Southern Alberta in particular, with irrigation, we have a lot of high value crops and a way more cropping options that are out there. So it really, I think, expands what we can grow, and it's really kind of exciting and interesting too.
So what are the soil conditions like? I know we haven't had a lot of snow so far this winter.
Yep.
So maybe are we going to have a real dry spring?
Well, I sure hope not, because we've basically come through 3 years of drought now. I actually think soil conditions are a little bit better this year than last year because we have actually had some really good fall moisture. Remember, back in September we had a big dump of snow, and January too. And the good part is that it wasn't frozen. The soil wasn't frozen, so the moisture was actually able to get in. So I don't think we're in fantastic conditions, but definitely better starting off point than last year. And it's really important too what precipitation we get in the growing season. So everybody's hopeful. This is one of those, we need to have a good year because it's been a tough go the last few years.
What are some of the hardier crops the farmers are planting right now?
In the dryland scenario, wheat is still a staple crop. So all of the wheats are doing well. The pulses are a shallower rooted crop, so they don't need it quite as much moisture, but they're quite heavily or readily adapted to a dryland scenario. It's just, it can't be zero rain. We need to have something.
Where does your funding come from? Is it private sector and government?
Yeah, so Farming Smarter actually has a broad range of funding sources. We're very much project-based, which means if there's a research project, we have to apply for a grant. So right now, we've got a really good spread between the provincial government, the federal government. We do get some support from producer grower groups. So there's some checkoffs for growing different crops. Those groups will support WGRF, the Western Grains Research Foundation is another group that helps support our projects. We generate revenue from sponsorship, from our events that we put on, and we also do industry contracts. So we'll do contract research for some of the agrochemical companies, nutrient companies, and you name it. So it's quite a diverse range of funding, and that's really my job to make sure that we are achieving what we're set out to do in our vision and building a stable base of support for what we do.
Ken, the budget came out recently here with the Alberta government. Mm-hmm. They've talked about a lot of cutbacks. Has that impacted your business as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is probably the most significant change to supporting agriculture that I've seen in my career. So we're looking at a significant reduction in support for agriculture, but mainly in really big cuts towards the provincial government itself. So their ability and capacity to do work is going to change quite significantly. If anything, that's going to put pressure on us to grow more, to be able to pick up some of the work that's being done. At this point, we really don't know yet exactly what's happening, but as far as our organization is concerned, especially given the different sources of funding that I just mentioned, we're definitely in good shape. If anything, we're going to grow.
Farming Smarter's had a long-time relationship with Lethbridge College. Mm-hmm. Now, you just signed a 15-year memorandum of understanding.
Yeah.
What is that all about?
Well, I'm actually really excited about that, and it's something that we've been working towards probably for the last 10 years. And Southern Alberta is such a hugely impactful, important piece of the ag economy. In fact, we did some work recently that showed that our area, which is basically south of Highway 1, represents 57% of the gross revenue in agriculture. Oh. So there's so much that happens in Southern Alberta. Because of that, there's a lot of opportunity and there's a lot of demand for work and entrepreneurship. So part of the reason we're working with the college is to be able to, work off each other's strengths and be able to serve this demanding industry. Like there's so many cool crops and businesses going on. We can't even come close to be able to service them all on our own. So the partnership allows us to put our resources together, to put our heads together, to build capacity, to be able to take advantage of some of these great opportunities that irrigation allows us to do. And just because agriculture is important, the Lethbridge College also sees that as a really important way of building human resources. So now we can partner on research, but we can partner on education as well. So we have all of these young students coming in. They're about to launch a new degree program in applied technology. Great opportunities for them to come learn about research and all the things that we're doing on our front. And the more we talk, the more we realize that there's opportunities to work together.
So if there are some young people that are considering going into farming, Ken, outside of a lot of startup capital, what advice would you give them?
Well, I think, you know, your brain is your biggest resource. And I think the more knowledge that you can achieve through learning, the better off you're going to be.
So do your research beforehand, right?
Yeah, and also pick an area that you're going to be passionate about. And I think that's you know, there's so many people passionate about agriculture, so I think there's something for everyone in agriculture, and I think there's actually a lot of jobs in agriculture too. So I'd always encourage students to look at programs like that at the college. If I was starting over again, I'd be looking at this new degree coming out of the Lethbridge College.
Now, farming has become a very high-tech business these days. Is there a measurable difference in success rates when you compare farmers staying up to date as opposed to maybe old-school farming techniques?
Kind of a $1 million question there, isn't it? I don't think there is a way to measure it. I believe that there's innovators and laggards in every aspect of agriculture. So you can be way advanced in one area and a complete laggard in another, but it might not matter. I personally believe that someone that's dedicated to learning and always challenging the accepted practices is eventually going to be ahead of the game. But agriculture is really, you know, the people that win it are the ones that can manage risk. So I do believe that the strengths in being able to create a farm system that best manages risks is the ones that are going to be successful.
Is there any progress being made on herbicide-resistant weeds here in the prairies?
That's also a tough question. There's progress, but there's also a lot of challenges that are increasing. So herbicide resistance is continually increasing. It's kind of like, you know, that old Jurassic Park movie, Nature Finds a Way. Right. As we continue to do the same things, it adapts, and that's what we're seeing. More and more herbicide resistance is developing. So in that sense, we're losing the game. Is there ways to manage it? Yes, and in some senses, we're coming up with ways to deal with problems quite positively, but it's one of those ones that will continue to be a challenge for farmers moving forward and will require more and more effort and more complex approaches to dealing with it.
Are there certain ways you can test the weeds to see if they are herbicide resistant?
There's certainly ways to test them, both in your field. If you spray your field and certain weeds survive when they shouldn't, that's actually a pretty good test. You can also take samples and send them off to labs for resistance testing. So not sure if that program will continue to exist given the cuts that are going on right now, but I sure hope so. But certainly it is about paying attention to what's going on. If you're seeing strange patterns or patches of weeds, and in the case of glyphosate tolerant kochia, you can actually see strips of weeds that are left behind from the tumbleweeds rolling across the field. So certainly, yes, you can.
So since the Chinese had that Canadian canola ban, the recent stats from Stats Canada says Canada has lost $1 billion worth of business. So the canola farmers that you've talked to, tell me about some of their struggles right now.
Well, this becomes a challenge in revenue. The price of canola has been hampered by those trade restrictions, and then that forces farmers to look at, can I grow less canola? And that's basically the only option you have at this point, unless the folks that are working really hard, and they are, at recovering markets, but also in developing new markets outside of China. So whenever we're dependent on one market, that again adds risk to the farm. So I know there's a lot of effort being put into developing new markets in other countries, and also about expanding internal crushing capacity so that you don't have to depend on expanding it. But that's a question that's really out of my wheelhouse, but it is certainly an impactful one.
So what are some of the other countries we're looking at possibly getting our products to market? Maybe India?
Yeah.
Maybe South Korea? What are some of the other?
I don't know.
the country?
This is not my area of expertise.
Just open it up, right?
You know, that's where you have these producer commissions that are really good at focusing in on that. So the Alberta Canola Producers Commission, the Canola Council of Canada, they've got experts in that field, and working with the major grain companies, the pioneers and so on. And I can guarantee you that they're putting every effort forward in developing those markets.
It's wonderful that Lethbridge College has a lot of the programs to get people interested in farming, the agriculture sector, and actually putting their resources into that. But there are also a lot of farming families who are getting out of it altogether. They're saying, this isn't profitable anymore. Have you talked to some of those families and the reasons why they're getting out? Is it all just about the money right now, or what is it?
Yeah,
the dedication, and there's a lot of hard work, right?
It's a lot of factors, and I think it's a tough business. And you'll see too that there's been a new movement looking at mental health in the agricultural industry too. I personally think there could be people that are getting out of it because it's just not fun.
And it's burnout,
and
right?
It's burnout, it's stressful, and I have a small farm on my own, and when you have a wreck, you have a really big wreck, and you got to have a pretty tough stomach to deal with the stress and the magnitude of the risks. You lose a bin of canola, all of a sudden that's $100,000 loss, just like that. So, I think those factors play in, but also, can you make a go of it? I mean, financially, you have to be able to, be able to service the debt and deal with the pressures there. But, I do think that the industry will survive, and there are folks that are moving on, but there are folks that are thriving. So
where's the biggest competition? Still from the States?
Probably ourselves. It all depends. At the farm unit, it's you're always your own biggest competition, and it could be everything from land competition from colonies. It could be everything is so very much specific. Did you own the land? Has the land been passed forward for generations? Do you have oil rights on your land? So it's pretty tough to come up with any single thing that's changing the industry. All that margins are tight. Farmers are being asked to do more than they ever did before. So it is more complex on every level, not just technology, but you never used to have to market your crops, right? Back in the day, you just sold it and that was it. Now if you want to be successful, you have to learn to be a really great marketer. You have to look at
smart business person.
Yeah, smart business planning,
Yep.
Risk management, you name it.
Wow. How about farmers that are also considering maybe more wind turbines or wind farms on their property?
Well, I think all of those off-farm revenue sources...
Does that help too?
Absolutely play a factor, because I see, areas that have lots of oil wells or leases on that. There's not as much pressure for them to perform on the agricultural front when you've got revenue generated from other sources. So I think, any off-farm source is going to help manage risk.
So
I have a full-time job to support my farming habit, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Your farming habit, right?
Yeah.
So where do you see the industry going maybe the next 5 to 10 years, and how can the federal or provincial governments really help out farmers today?
Yeah, well, I think that as we see the technologies change in marketing, I think marketing has been the big drive recently. So can you grow a new crop and then direct market it yourself and cut out the middleman? So whenever you have a really unique opportunity there to be a price setter instead of a price taker, that's going to be the difference. We hear a lot about, marketing tools like blockchain and things like that. I don't know if that's going to be fully developed in the next 5 years. 5 years goes by pretty quick, so I'm not going to expect a tremendous amount of change, but we always tend to underestimate the change in the short term too. So I think it's steady as we go. It's managing risk. It's dealing with the weather that we have.
How about taking off the carbon tax as well, off the natural gas for drying a lot of these grains, right?
Yeah, well, when you have we have a drought and then the rest of the province can't get their crops off. So it's totally different problems across the entire province. So that's when you talk about a government's role in trying to support that. It's pretty tough because we all have different problems. We don't need grain dryers because we barely had a crop to grow. But I think things like that definitely make a difference. If we can have exemptions on carbon tax, I can't see how that's not going to hurt. I know even on the irrigation front, it's amazing how much the carbon tax adds to something as simple as that. And the reality is that margins are tight in agriculture. So unless you're either really big farm or you've carved out a really nice niche. Those little differences can make or break an organization.
Ken Coles from Farming Smarter, thanks a lot for joining me in studio today.
Thanks for having me, Al.
The coronavirus has now spread to over 60 countries around the world, infecting more than 80,000 people with around 3,000 deaths. Italy has reported a 50% increase in confirmed cases. Egypt says 1,443 have tested positive for the virus. Australia and Thailand have reported their first deaths. To talk more about it is our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari, joining me from Washington. Lisa, the death toll in Iran has also jumped to 54, with close to 1,000 people in that country affected. A woman in her 60s from Iran is in self-isolation here in Canada, in Vancouver. The COVID-19 is not going away anytime soon.
No, it is not. And of course, this has everyone alarmed on all continents as we hear of more and more cases being reported. A similar case to you in Canada is an Iranian woman just became the first case in New York City. That has a lot of people panicking as well. Every morning at the foreign desk, we put out a top 10 email, and we have reported on the spread and the updates on coronavirus every single day since it has been detected. And of course, the stories keep adding on. Our list of countries keeps growing, and our list of cases keeps growing. Iran being one of the countries where we're not sure because of the underreporting and the lack of accurate reporting that comes out of the government there. So that number might actually be even higher and affecting more people who are getting on airplanes and very irresponsibly, either by the government themselves or unknowingly, because this is a dormant virus that lives within a human being for about 2 weeks before they see any symptoms that would alert one to be checked. So, of course, this is a cause for people to be alarmed. I flew actually to Washington, D.C. from Los Angeles 2 days ago, and of course, many people flying with masks on and many choosing not to fly. I'm currently in Washington for the APAC conference, as you know, Al, and this conference draws in about 25,000 people every year, and this year it's significantly less because I feel a lot of people, including myself, had to review our decision to make the flight.
So how close are we to actually finding an antidote, a cure for so many cases here?
Yeah, interestingly enough, there is a lab in Israel that has been studying this virus even before it became the pandemic that it is becoming. And they said that they may have the first look at some sort of vaccine within weeks from now, but that vaccine will have to be tested and retested again. So, we're not actually, targeting this exact thing. And I think it's going to be a while before we see something that is, actually can be put into practice and put to work. So until then, unfortunately, Hal, these numbers are going to be rising.
The U.S. and the Taliban recently signed a landmark agreement to end America's longest war. Lisa, the Pentagon sees the Taliban deal as allowing for fuller focus on China.
It's really interesting. Already that deal has been broken. When I say broken, Hal, you and I, we always talk about these attacks within Afghanistan, of course, the Taliban taking responsibility. But what is the solution for the U.S. pulling out of Afghanistan and putting some group that has the know-how and the control and the ability and the power to take over in the absence of American presence? Well, many people believe that we don't negotiate with terrorists, and what deal is a deal with a terrorist anyway? As we can see again, as I said, hours after the deal was put into place, we saw reports of Taliban attacks in Afghanistan. Other lawmakers here in the United States believe, well, we have to pull out, and the only answer is to deal with the only choice that we have, and that is to deal with the Taliban. So, unfortunately, this is the future of a country that has been war-torn for decades upon decades, and this is no solution, though, for anything significant for them in the near future.
Now, still with the Taliban, Afghan's president has rejected Taliban demands for a prisoner release. Tell me more about that.
Right. So imagine, not only has the Taliban not proven themselves in order to be a legitimate answer for Afghanistan's future, but imagine these terrorists filling the streets again. And again, there has been no redemption. There has been no legitimate claim for the Taliban to deserve this type of, to excuse them for all these years of terrorism. So yes, this is going to be a hard sell to agree upon releasing all of these terrorists.
China is seeking to control the UN agency that oversees intellectual property, and the United States is pushing back.
Yes, of course they're pushing back. This is one of the very sensitive parts of the deal between the U.S. and China, and why President Trump has not been able to come to an agreement with the Chinese is over, among many other things, their reluctance to stop with the copycat stealing of intellectual property. And as we know, they steal drones, they steal electronics, they steal all sorts of intellectual property, and they replicate it for half the price or even less than that. This has been an ongoing trend for the Chinese. They've profited from it for many years, and now, of course, the U.S. wants to put a stop on it. From everything from, as I said, military technology to designer handbags, this has been a way of living for many Chinese exporters. So, the UN wanting to put, the Chinese rather, wanting to put their interests on the table at the UN, and of course the US wanting to put a stop to it.
The war in Syria is escalating as Turkey shot down 2 Syrian military aircraft. Lisa, reports say the target was the military airport, and Russia has a message for Turkey: we cannot guarantee the safety of your planes over Syria.
So many different layers in the war in Syria that has been going on for about a decade now. And of course, every group that gets involved has their own agenda. We've talked about how, Russia's in there and they want to boost the Bashar al-Assad regime. Iran is in there wanting to boost the Bashar al-Assad regime. Turkey is in there wanting to curb the influence and growth of the Kurdish population. And of course, when they're all in there in a small country like Syria, of course, they are fighting each other, and they're fighting each other for influence, for land, and to get the control back in their hands. So now Turkey, who had been more of a quiet partner for the Western allies, has become a more vocal partner because they want their agenda to go full force against the Kurds in Syria. But now they're getting pulled into the fray, as we knew would happen, and they're seeing more casualties as well.
And Turkish drones killed 19 Syrian government soldiers as tensions, they're continuing to rise.
Yes. So as I said, the Turks are upping the ante. They have to double down because if they're going to be involved, they want this to be as short and as sweet as possible. And as I said, this is not a situation that has been short or sweet by any means for anyone who's been getting involved on the ground in Syria.
More attacks on Israel, Lisa. The Jerusalem Post is reporting that a mortar was fired from Gaza towards Israel just hours before the polls opened for elections.
Yes, so election week, obviously a very sensitive time in Israel. Another election week, I should say. We've been through this many times. But it's business as usual for the Palestinians who have been launching missiles into Israel from Gaza for years upon years, but I should say more recently, more frequently, believing that the Israelis have their own issues to tend to. And if the Israelis are more occupied with their election and they're looking the other way, well, perhaps it's a good time to start lobbing missiles into that country. Again, this is a day in the life. Israeli children are often have to climb into these shelters. They often have to put on their gas masks. They are lobbing these missiles into civilian areas. And, how you always kid around about how since biblical times, this has been a way of life for Jews and Israelis living in that part of the world. And of course, it continues.
2 rockets fell earlier this week inside of a heavily fortified green zone in the Iraqi capital of Baghdad. This region houses government buildings and various foreign missions. Fortunately, there were no casualties, and a missile also apparently landed near the U.S. Embassy.
We wonder who that was, right? More turmoil in Iraq, of course, as things try to settle down there. Iraq is a very interesting situation because you had the protesters who came out and said enough with this. You have a government that said enough with this, but at the same time is embracing the Iranian insurgency there because they feel like they don't have a choice. It's almost like what we're looking at in Afghanistan, similar to what we're looking at in Lebanon with Hezbollah being intertwined with the government there. When you're looking at Iraq, they want to go forward. They want to build their nation, go forward, but they feel as though they have to include the Iranian insurgency so that they could live in peace rather than in war with this insurgency. At the same time, the Iranians are busy fighting the American forces that are still remaining there. Most have pulled out, but again, these assets, as we know from the killing of Qasem Soleimani, from the time that, from that killing till now, the retaliatory attacks have been around American assets. So again, we look at the Iranian regime, we look at the culprit that could be, because they are still after getting that revenge and really avenging the murder of Qasem Soleimani, their commander.
Around 20,000 protesters marched through Moscow recently against the Russian government's proposed constitutional changes. Many view those changes as an attempt by Vladimir Putin to maintain his power beyond the end of his term in 2024.
Yes, so this major power grab by Putin, kind of went unnoticed. He thought nobody would know. Let me just casually extend my power and make my reign ironclad when I can. But now he's got problems back at home. When you have 20,000 Russians marching the streets, I think he's going to go hard on them, just like he goes hard on journalists who speak badly about him. But for Putin, what has been steady for him has been a constant support from home. His constituents enjoy good relations with the government because he is good to them. You hear this from minority groups living in Russia. You hear this from fringe groups living and human rights groups on the ground there as well, because Putin is more involved in his extra regional activities. At this point, when he has trouble back at home, this will reflect poorly on him, both at home and abroad. And I think he will have more to worry about this time around because he is spread so thin abroad. I think he'll want to put an end to this very quickly. He might go hard before, so it gets worse before it gets better, so he can quash this thing once and for all. But we'll see how adamant those protesters are about sending their message to the rest of the world.
Lisa, you're in Washington right now. Let's talk a bit about what's happening with the Democrats. Bloomberg, Sanders, the list goes on and on with a lot of the Democratic candidates. Who do you see as the biggest frontrunner and the biggest competition potentially for Donald Trump?
Well, it looks as though for the Democrats themselves, they're worried that Bernie Sanders will take the ticket. And for that reason, we've seen many drop out in the last couple days in order to make room for Joe Biden, who is obviously a much more center candidate and who the Democrats believe is more representative of their party rather than Bernie Sanders, a self-proclaimed socialist Democrat. For Donald Trump, I think he has said at the CPAC conference last week that he hopes that it's Bernie Sanders who is running against him so that he can put an end and defeat socialism once and for all. It'll be difficult. In terms of the vote, of course, Joe Biden being a more centered candidate, that is very true and more representative of the Democrat Party. But people are worried that Bernie Sanders will go after, the millennial vote, feel the burn. Many people who are not aware of Bernie Sanders, the nuances of what he believes and what socialism actually is, what his policies really mean, the fact that he has distanced himself from so many different groups in the United States, including refusing to go to AIPAC, the conference that I'm at right now, because he calls Israel's or this organization's, which is the biggest pro-Israel lobby in the United States, bigotry. I think he's done a lot of damage to the party, but many believe that he's electable because of the millennials, and a lot of people believe in his message.
How about the Trump impeachment trial, the whole process, Lisa? Some people say it really galvanized the right, and it's going to make him even more appealing to be reelected later this year. Or some other people say, no, that's it, we're done, we're going to go with the Democrats. What are you hearing right now?
It depends who the candidate will be. I believe if you might get a lot of the independents going over to vote for a Democrat if that Democrat is palatable to them. I don't see independents going and voting for Bernie Sanders by any means. On the other hand, the economy, give or take a couple days here and there with the stock market adjusting to the coronavirus crisis, is doing great. The economy is doing great. And I think a lot of Americans that are middle of the road politically, financially, and otherwise, geographically as well, will vote with their pockets more than anything else. And when you come down to the economy, you can't argue jobs. You can't argue these numbers. With regards to foreign policy, national security, he's doing great. I actually think it's Trump's to lose. I think he's the only one who can defeat Trump right now. So if he remains steady and focused on his message, on the economy, on his strengths, then I think that he has a very good chance at re-election right now.
And the elections coming up in November should be interesting to see how it plays out. Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining me from Washington this time. Thanks so much, Lisa.
My pleasure.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.